Most people who attempt to save $15,000 never even reach $4,000. Not because they are careless, not because they lack ambition, not because they are incapable, but because they are unknowingly trapped inside a psychological system that has been shaping their financial behavior since childhood. It is uncomfortable to admit, but necessary to understand. The average person is not in control of their financial decisions. Their emotions are. Nearly 90% of individuals who set ambitious savings goals abandon them within the first 6 months. This is not speculation. This pattern appears consistently across behavioral finance studies conducted in multiple countries, across multiple income groups, across multiple generations. The numbers are not the problem. The people are not the problem. The method is the problem. Modern financial advice teaches people to fight themselves. Just be disciplined. Just stop spending. Just control your impulses. But this ignores a fundamental truth. Humans are not rational decision makers. They are emotional creatures who justify decisions after they have already been made emotionally. Not as numbers on a screen, but as a psychological system that can either enslave you or liberate you, depending on whether you understand how it truly works. Because money is never just money. Money is identity. Money is security. Money is fear. Money is power. Money is shame. Money is freedom. And until you understand the psychology behind it, no budgeting app, no motivational speech, no financial book will ever permanently change your results. The human brain evolved for survival, not for long-term financial planning. Thousands of years ago, survival depended on consuming resources when available. Delaying gratification could mean death. The brain still operates under that ancient wiring. That is why saving feels unnatural. That is why spending feels satisfying. That is why future goals feel abstract. That is why present comfort feels urgent. Behavioral scientists call one of the strongest of these forces loss aversion. Loss aversion means that the brain experiences loss much more intensely than gain. Losing $100 feels significantly worse than gaining $100 feels good. This imbalance is not small. It is powerful enough to shape behavior at scale. Now understand what saving feels like to the brain. When you move money into savings, the brain interprets it as loss. When you refuse a purchase, the brain interprets it as deprivation. When you delay pleasure, the brain interprets it as punishment. This is why people feel exhausted when trying to save. This is why budgeting often collapses after a few weeks. This is why people feel guilty when they save, but relieved when they spend. You are not weak. You are not broken. You are responding exactly as your biology instructs you to. The problem is not you. The problem is the system you were taught to use. Traditional saving methods require constant self-control. Every purchase becomes a battle. Every temptation becomes internal conflict. Every decision requires emotional energy. But willpower is not infinite. It depletes. It weakens under stress. It collapses under fatigue. This is why people fail during hard months. This is why people fail when emotions are heavy. This is why people fail when life becomes unpredictable. The solution is not stronger discipline. The solution is designing a structure where discipline becomes unnecessary. Behavioral researchers discovered something crucial. People who removed decision-making from the process saved dramatically more than those who relied on motivation, not because they were smarter, not because they cared more, but because they eliminated emotional friction. They built systems instead of relying on strength. That is where real financial progress begins. Not with motivation, not with goals, not with inspiration, but with architecture. When income arrives and savings are delayed until after spending, the brain immediately claims ownership of that money. It becomes emotionally yours. Removing it later feels painful. But when savings happen first, before conscious awareness of available funds, the brain never forms attachment. No attachment means no emotional resistance. No resistance means no struggle. No struggle means consistency. Consistency is what creates wealth. Most people do not fail because they do not know what to do. They fail because their environment is designed to sabotage them. They receive money, they see the balance, they feel rich temporarily, they spend emotionally, they promise to save later. Later never comes. A properly designed system reverses this sequence. The environment changes, the behavior changes, the results change, without force, without struggle, without exhaustion. This is only the foundation. The real transformation begins when we go deeper into present bias, dopamine loops, identity-based spending, ego-driven financial behavior, emotional attachment to consumption, long-term future visualization, cognitive reframing, psychological resistance patterns, and most importantly, how to design a system where your worst habits stop mattering because the system protects you from yourself. By the time most people reach adulthood, their relationship with money is already broken, not because of numbers, not because of income, but because of experience. A child grows up hearing stress behind closed doors, arguments about bills, silence when money is mentioned, parents working endlessly but never seeming relaxed, a quiet fear that stability is fragile. That child grows into an adult who associates money with anxiety, scarcity, and insecurity, even if they never consciously acknowledge it. This is where most financial journeys truly begin, not with math, but with emotional memory. People don't spend because they're stupid. They spend because spending temporarily relieves emotional pressure. After a long day, a purchase feels like comfort. After rejection, shopping feels like control. After loneliness, consumption feels like connection. After stress, buying feels like relief. This is not financial behavior. This is emotional coping disguised as financial behavior. And the modern world is engineered to exploit it. Every app on your phone is designed around dopamine engineering. Notifications, red icons, limited time offers, scarcity messaging, one-click purchases, endless scrolling, algorithmic targeting. You are not casually browsing the internet. You are inside a behavioral influence system built by billion-dollar companies that understand your psychology better than you do. Dopamine is the chemical of anticipation, not reward. The brain does not feel pleasure when you buy something. It feels pleasure when you anticipate buying it. That is why the excitement fades quickly after a purchase. That is why regret follows. That is why the cycle repeats. This is not a character flaw. This is neurological conditioning. Understanding this changes everything. Because once you understand the mechanism, you can design strategies that work with your brain instead of against it. One of the most powerful shifts happens when people stop asking, "How do I stop spending?" and start asking, "How do I delay decisions?" There is enormous psychological power in delay. When someone feels an urge to purchase, the emotional brain is in control, the rational mind is quiet, the future feels irrelevant. But when a purchase is delayed by days, the emotional spike fades, the rational mind returns, perspective reappears. This is why the 30-day rule works so powerfully, not because it forces discipline, but because it allows the emotional wave to pass. Most impulses are temporary, most desires are manufactured, most urgency is artificial. People who implement this single strategy often experience a profound shift. They begin to realize how little they actually want most things. This is not deprivation. This is clarity. But clarity alone does not create transformation. Transformation happens when behavior begins to align with identity. Most people unconsciously identify as, "I'm bad with money, I'm not disciplined, I'm just not good at saving, money never stays with me." This identity becomes self-fulfilling. But when systems begin to work, when progress becomes visible, when control starts to feel real, something deeper changes. The identity begins to shift. I'm someone who plans. I'm someone who thinks long-term. I'm someone who makes intentional decisions. I'm someone who builds stability. That identity shift is more powerful than any budgeting strategy, because behavior always follows identity. There is another invisible force shaping financial outcomes: ego spending. Many people believe they spend for comfort or convenience. In reality, a large portion of modern spending is about image. Cars become symbols, phones become status, clothing becomes performance, lifestyle becomes projection. People do not simply want to own things, they want to be perceived a certain way. The tragedy is that many people finance identities they don't even enjoy living in. They purchase approval from people they don't like. They maintain appearances for audiences who are not paying attention. They sacrifice long-term freedom for short-term validation. And slowly, quietly, they become trapped, not by poverty, but by expectation. When individuals finally confront this truth, it is uncomfortable, but it is also liberating. Because it reveals that financial freedom is often not limited by income, it is limited by perception. When someone stops asking, "What will people think?" and starts asking, "What do I actually want my life to feel like?" everything changes. Suddenly, many expenses lose their emotional power. Suddenly, restraint feels empowering rather than restrictive. Suddenly, saving becomes a form of self-respect rather than sacrifice. This is where maturity begins. Not financial maturity, psychological maturity. Future-oriented thinking is another skill rarely taught. Most people perceive the future as abstract, distant, unreal. That is why present bias dominates behavior. But when individuals begin to visualize their future self vividly, when they emotionally connect to the person they're becoming, saving stops being about denial and starts being about protection. You are no longer saving for someday, you are saving for a person you care about, your future self. This subtle shift is one of the strongest behavioral predictors of long-term success. People who emotionally connect to their future self make better decisions today, not because they are stronger, but because they feel accountable to someone they value. At this stage, something remarkable begins to happen. Money stops feeling chaotic. Spending stops feeling impulsive. Decisions stop feeling exhausting. Instead of reacting emotionally to every financial moment, individuals begin to observe themselves. They notice urges, they notice triggers, they notice patterns. And awareness creates distance. Distance creates choice. Choice creates control. This is no longer about saving $15,000. This is about reclaiming agency over your own behavior. And yet, even here, most people will face a moment of resistance, a moment where progress slows, a month where discipline weakens, a setback that feels discouraging. This is where most journeys collapse, unless something deeper has formed. Not strategy, not logic, but meaning. Because when saving is just a goal, it is fragile. When saving is tied to purpose, it becomes resilient. There comes a moment in every transformation where knowledge stops being enough. By this stage, the systems are understood, the psychology is clear, the habits are improving, the awareness is stronger, yet something still feels incomplete. Because deep down, many people are still asking the same silent question: why should I actually care enough to keep going? Not the polite answer, not the motivational quote, not the version shared publicly. The real answer, the uncomfortable one, the emotional one, the one most people avoid facing. This is the moment where everything either collapses or finally becomes unbreakable. Most people begin their financial journey for shallow reasons. They want more money, they want a better lifestyle, they want to feel successful, they want to prove something. These motivations are weak, they fade easily,
They disappear when life becomes stressful. But the people who truly change, the ones who don't just start strong but continue long-term, are driven by something much deeper. They are driven by emotional truth. Some people are motivated by memory. They remember what it felt like to hear their parents whispering about bills. They remember the anxiety of uncertainty. They remember the helplessness of having no financial control. And they make a silent decision. My life will not look like this. Not out of pride, but out of pain. Others are motivated by responsibility. They think of their future family, their future children, the people who may one day depend on them. They understand that financial stability is not luxury, it is protection. Protection against chaos, protection against panic, protection against vulnerability. For some, the motivation is freedom, the freedom to leave a job that drains their soul, the freedom to say no, the freedom to choose how they spend their time, the freedom to live deliberately rather than reactively. This is not abstract, this is emotional. And when the emotional reason becomes clear, something profound changes. Saving stops feeling like efforts, discipline stops feeling like struggle, structure stops feeling like restriction. It starts to feel like self-respect. This is where people finally understand. They were never saving money, they were building power. Power to choose, power to decide, power to breathe without fear, power to live with dignity. Money is no longer just currency, it becomes a tool for autonomy. And that realization transforms behavior more deeply than any financial tactic ever could. At this point, the system is no longer fragile because it is no longer being fueled by discipline alone. It is being fueled by identity. I am someone who plans. I am someone who thinks long-term. I am someone who protects my future. I am someone who honors my potential. When identity shifts, habits follow effortlessly. People who reach this stage no longer fight themselves every day. They no longer feel like they are forcing behavior. Instead, they feel aligned. And alignment is powerful.
There is another shift that happens quietly around this time. People stop feeling jealous of others' lifestyles. They stop comparing themselves to strangers. They stop feeling behind. Why? Because they finally understand that most visible lifestyles are financed by debt, pressure, and insecurity. They begin to see clearly. They see expensive cars as liabilities. They see luxury consumption as performance. They see excessive spending as anxiety disguised as success. And instead of envy, they feel calm because they know something most people do not. They are building something real. This is when progress accelerates, not because income suddenly increases, but because behavior stabilizes. Impulse spending decreases naturally. Awareness becomes automatic. Decisions become intentional. The system works quietly in the background. The mind no longer resists. The habits become identity. Saving becomes normal. Patience becomes natural. Long-term thinking becomes instinct. And without drama, without burnout, without extreme measures, the numbers begin to grow. Slowly, then steadily, then inevitably. Reaching $15,000 no longer feels extraordinary. It feels expected. Because by this stage, the person has already changed. They are no longer someone who struggles with money. They are no longer someone who avoids financial reality. They are no longer someone who feels controlled by impulse. They are someone who understands themselves, and that understanding is the real wealth. This is the moment most people misunderstand. They think the goal was the money. It was never the money. The money was simply proof of transformation. The real achievement was psychological awareness, emotional control, identity shift, long-term thinking, personal discipline, systemic design, behavioral maturity. These traits do not disappear after one financial goal. They compound, they scale, they carry into every future income increase, every future opportunity, every future decision. This is how ordinary people quietly build extraordinary futures. This is also where the narrative ends differently for different people. Some will hear this message, feel inspired for a few hours, and return to old patterns. Others will recognize themselves in every word. They will feel discomfort, they will feel clarity, they will feel honesty, and they will quietly begin changing small behaviors, not publicly, not dramatically, but consistently. Those are the people who succeed, not because they are smarter, but because they are willing to confront themselves. Here is the truth that separates those who change from those who remain stuck. You do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. If you build systems that protect you from your own psychology, you win. If you rely on motivation and willpower, you eventually lose, every time. This is why automation matters. This is why awareness matters. This is why emotional honesty matters. This is why identity matters. This is not about becoming rich. This is about becoming stable, free, intentional, grounded. Because financial stability is not about impressing anyone. It is about waking up without anxiety. It is about making decisions without panic. It is about facing the future without fear. Most people will spend their entire lives waiting for the perfect moment to begin. They will say, after my next raise, after this month, after things calm down, after I feel more ready. Years will pass, nothing will change, not because change was impossible, but because the decision was never made. The truth is simple. You do not need a perfect plan. You do not need a high income. You do not need extreme discipline. You need one thing, a system that makes progress inevitable. A system where saving happens before spending, a system where impulses are delayed, a system where ego-driven choices are questioned, a system where the future is considered before the present. That is it. Not motivation, not hype, not pressure, just structure.
Because structure outlives emotion, systems outlast motivation, architecture survives stress. If you build the right system, even your bad days will not destroy your progress. And over time, quietly, steadily, without drama, you will look back and realize something extraordinary. You are no longer struggling. You are no longer behind. You are no longer hoping. You are building. And that is the real ending of this story. Not a dramatic transformation, not a cinematic explosion, not overnight success, but something far more powerful. A person who finally understands themselves. A person who designed their life intentionally. A person who stopped fighting their psychology and started working with it. A person who took control of their future without noise, without validation, without performance. Just clarity, just structure, just progress. $15,000 was never the destination. It was simply the point where you proved to yourself that you were no longer living on autopilot. And once you reach that point, there is no limit to what you can build.